The Great Pyramid of Gize in Egypt is the only one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world to survive to the present day, and it remains a marvel of design and execution. Despite this, however, we know very little about its origins, or the purpose of its many peculiar features. Egyptologists generally agree that it was built as a pharaoh's tomb, but specialists from a variety of different disciplines have shown it to be vastly more complex than other pyramids, and very different from other tombs, suggesting that it may have had some other function altogether. From at least as early as 3500 BCE, ancient peoples all over the world built structures that incorporated some element of a square-based pyramid in their design. Pyramids are found on all continents but Antarctica and Australia, in countries such as Mexico, Peru, Iraq, India, China, and Cambodia, just to name a few. At 4,500 years old, the 3 pyramids of the Gize Plateau in Egypt are among the world's earliest, and still among the most impressive. Egyptologists believe that they were constructed over about 100 years at the height of the ancient Egyptian Old Kingdom, in the middle of the 3rd millennium BCE, as tombs for 3 4th dynasty pharaohs. They are located just outside the modern city of Gize, 9 kilometers, or 5 miles west of the Nile, though at the time that they were built, the Nile was much farther west, and the pyramid sat on its western shore. The structures are part of an ancient complex that also includes several smaller pyramids, a few temples, tombs, and cemeteries, an industrial zone, a workers' village, and the Great Sphinx, all nestled by the edge of a cliff. Some have calculated that Gize sits at the geographical center of the Earth, or the center of all land surface in the world. The Great Pyramid is the largest of the 3 at Gize, and it's thought to be the first constructed. It sits on a leveled limestone platform built into the bedrock, though a mound of bedrock bulges up into the base. The sides of the pyramid face squarely in each cardinal direction, with the entrance facing true north to an extremely high degree of accuracy. The pyramid is composed of some 2.3 million limestone and granite blocks. The limestone blocks seen from outside weigh an average of 2.3 metric tons each, but some of the granite blocks inside weigh more than 60. When built, the pyramid had a height of 146.7 meters, with a mean base length of 230.3 meters. Until the completion of the Lincoln Cathedral in 1311 CE, it was the tallest man-made structure on Earth. Though the 2nd and 3rd pyramids look about the same, they are in fact much inferior structures. They contain only a fraction of the amount of granite, and the stonework is of poorer quality. Joints run wide, blocks lack mortar, and the sides of the 3rd pyramid differ in length by nearly 2.5 meters. The Great Pyramid boasts far superior craftsmanship. The base is as close to a perfect square as any modern construction, and all sides fall within 4.3 centimeters of each other in length. A layer of smooth limestone casing blocks once covered the pyramid, giving it a white reflective surface, but most of these were looted for use in Cairo. The few that remain are set so tight that between them there is a mean gap of only half a millimeter. Materials scientist Michel Barsoum, building on a theory by Joseph Davidovits, has provided evidence that these casing blocks, and the blocks immediately under them, were not carved from natural limestone, but cast in place from a poured mixture. Most Egyptologists, however, maintain that the stones were quarried with copper chisels. The pyramid does not come to a complete point, leading some Egyptologists to believe that it once had 9 more layers, or a pointed capstone that was likely made of gold and stolen by looters. A little known fact about the pyramid is that there are actually 8 sides, not 4. Each side is bent slightly in on itself along the vertical axis, creating a crease down the middle that's only visible from above, but can be seen from the ground on the equinoxes, when the 2 halves get different lighting. However, Egyptologists say that these bends were builders' errors that would have been hidden by the casing. A wrought iron plate was found between two blocks of stone during an excavation in 1837, apparently set there at the time of construction, though it is believed that Old Kingdom Egyptians were not capable of working iron. The find is controversial. Like most other pyramids, the Great Pyramid has a descending passage and a subterranean chamber, but it is unique in Old Kingdom Egypt for also containing rooms built above ground level. One of the greatest mysteries of the pyramid is that there are no images, adornments, or hieroglyphics anywhere inside, apart from some hidden graffiti left by the builders. The spaces are as empty now as they were when they were first explored, though they have since been cleaned and cleared of rubble. They have a drab industrial look to them, and are not easily traveled. Most of the passageways are only about a meter tall, or just over 3 feet, and despite a 26-degree slope, they had no steps or rails until some were built for tourists in the 20th century. The entranceway was hidden in the outer casing. It sits 17 meters off the ground, and slightly off-center. Though ancient writers such as Strabo were aware of this entrance and knew of the descending passage, at some point in history, someone tunneled through the stones nearby and broke through the ceiling of the introductory passage to get inside. Later Arab writers claim that the Abbasid Caliph al-Mamun dug this tunnel in the 9th century CE, but there are no contemporary sources to confirm this. The whole interior is laid out on a flat plain oriented north-south. The entrance leads to a tunnel that descends at 26 degrees and is remarkably straight. Over 106.7 meters, the walls and the ceiling drift out from each other by less than 8 millimeters. In the part that's built, not carved, they drift out by only half a millimeter. This passage ends in a small, crudely cut chamber 30 meters underground. The rock in this room is heavily eroded, as if by water. There is a strange pit dug in the floor, and a passage into the south wall opposite the entrance that dead ends after 16 meters. The first descending passage breaks off into an ascending one at the same angle, originally hidden by a limestone facing, and blocked on the other side by 3 large granite plugs. There is also an irregular tunnel that climbs steeply from the end of the descending passage, and connects with the end of the ascending one. From here there is a level passage to a small room with a sloped ceiling, and a tall corbelled niche in the wall. The room is called the Queen's Chamber, though no queen was interred here. When it was first discovered, this room was covered in patches of salt that were several centimeters thick in places. There are 2 shafts about 20 centimeters square, extending up and out from the north and south walls, though they were covered when found, and hidden in the walls. A dual hook made of copper was found in one shaft, and a stone ball and piece of cedar wood in the other. These shafts are blocked after 63 meters by stone slabs with copper handles. When a crew with a robot drilled a hole through the slab in the southern shaft, they found it was blocked again on the other side. From the point where the passage to this room begins, the ascending passage becomes the Grand Gallery, which has a high corbelled ceiling. There are evenly spaced inlets in the floor along the walls, and corresponding scorch marks on the ceiling. The gallery ends in a short passage to a small room called the antechamber. There are grooves in the walls, once thought to hold 3 large granite slabs that could be independently lowered to block the entrance to the last room, called the King's Chamber. The King's Chamber is entirely faced with granite, and was found containing only a chipped granite box with a crudely chiseled finish. It has walls that are freestanding, or isolated from the floor and ceiling. The ceiling is made up of huge granite slabs that weigh a total of 360 metric tons. Above this are 4 more layers of giant blocks, some weighing more than 63 tons each, separated by short spaces and topped by a sloped granite roof. The pockets are called the relieving chambers because it is thought that they help distribute the weight of the roof. However, the Queen's chamber bears more weight with the same roof, and no such relieving chambers. As in the Queen's chamber, there are 2 small shafts in the walls of the King's chamber, but these were never covered, and they reach all the way outside. Muon tomography scans have determined that there are 2 oblong voids inside the pyramid, possibly filled with other materials, that have yet to be explored. There is no contemporary record that explicitly states who constructed the Gize pyramids and why. A few clues have led Egyptologists to believe that the Great Pyramid was built by Khufu, whose reign is dated as beginning around 2600 to 2550 BCE. Khufu's son Khafre built the second smaller pyramid, and Khafre's grandson, Menkaure, whose reign ended around 2500 BCE or after, built the third smallest one. None of these pharaohs' mummies were found, but it's believed that Khufu's was once laid inside the granite box in the king's chamber, a last-minute replacement sarcophagus. The other 2 rooms were simply rejected attempts at the same burial chamber, and were not used. Despite the near consensus in Egyptology, there is very little evidence that any of the 3 pyramids at Giza were built as tombs, though at least Menkaure's was later used as one. The most reliable sources describing Al-Mamun's entry into the Great Pyramid make it clear that it was already empty in the 9th century CE. Furthermore, it did not appear that anyone had entered the pyramid before him, since the entrance was still hidden. The king's chamber was already unsealed, and there is no evidence that any kind of obstruction had been forcibly removed. There were 90 pyramids built over 1,000 years in Old Kingdom Egypt, but only some were clearly tombs. One is the Step Pyramid of Djoser, thought to be the first pyramid in ancient Egypt, though it was first built as a mastaba, a more traditional burial structure. Inside it looks much different than the Great Pyramid, boasting a grand colonnade with carved pillars, and richly decorated walls depicting Djoser with previous kings. Only one complete mummy has been found in an Old Kingdom pyramid, in the ruined pyramid of Merenre at Saqqara, although it's not clear that the body is Merenre's. Other non-pyramidal tombs, like those in the Valley of the Kings, look much different. They have walls covered in images and hieroglyphics telling the story of the deceased. Many also have large decorated rooms, not cramped empty passageways, and feature ornate sarcophagi that far outshine the pyramid's plain granite box. It's also been noted that this box is barely large enough to hold a person, and would not have been large enough to fit a smaller box to hold the mummy, as was custom. These incongruities, and all the other anomalies throughout the Great Pyramid, suggest that it was more than just a place of internment, and probably had some other function altogether. So what was the pyramid for, if not to hold a body? Some suggest that it may have served some function in astronomy. Robert Bauval has shown how the 3 pyramids are positioned to match the particular alignment of the 3 stars of Orion's belt around 10,000 to 10,500 BCE. Bauval and astrophysicist Thomas Brophy have shown that the pyramids align with these stars as they cross the central meridian at this time, while Bauval has also argued that the 4 shafts in the Great Pyramid pointed to important stars and constellations around the year 2450 BCE. Bauval and writer Graham Hancock have argued that Gize was a map of the stars, with the Sphinx standing in for Leo, and the Nile for the Milky Way. Bauval and geologist Robert Schoch believe that the Great Pyramid played some role in tracking celestial movements like the precession of the equinox. Writers like Eckhard Schmitz have argued that the ancient Egyptians tried to communicate key Earth measurements and mathematical knowledge to future generations through the dimensions of the structure itself. For example, if the pyramid were scaled up so that its base was the diameter of the Earth, then its height would be the radius of the Earth plus the radius of the Moon. Randall Carlson of Sacred Geometry has shown that the pyramid's length is almost exactly half a minute of latitude, and argues that the dimensions of the Earth are encoded in the structure at a scale of 1 to 43,200. Many components of the Great Pyramid appear to be designed according to the Golden Ratio, or to pi, though most Egyptologists maintain that the ancient Egyptians were not aware of these concepts. For example, pi is closely approximated in the slope of the outer walls, and the Golden Ratio is reflected in the various elevations of the three chambers, and the dimensions of the King's Chamber. Having previously presented evidence of powered machining in the pyramid, Christopher Dunn published a book in 1998 that suggested that the ancient structure was a power plant for a microwave beam. Dunn believed that hydrochloric acid was poured into the south shaft of the Queen's Chamber, while hydrated zinc was poured in through the north. They would mix in the Queen's Chamber and produce hydrogen gas, which would have reacted with the limestone to create the salt that lined the walls. The hydrogen would then drift up into the King's Chamber through the gallery, where it would have been energized by pulsing compression waves generated in the subterranean chamber, causing a microwave beam to fire out the southern shaft. Dunn suggested that the pyramid quit working after a large explosion in the King's Chamber, for which there is some evidence. The red granite box, originally a rose color, is dark brown, as if scorched. There are also cracks in the ceiling beams, and the walls of the chamber are separated from the floor and bowed outwards. John Cadman, a hydrologist, has shown how the ancient Egyptians could have created a water hammer effect in the subterranean chamber to pump pulses of water up the descending passage and into the base of the pyramid, creating the compression waves postulated in Dunn's model. This would explain the water erosion in the subterranean chamber. Danny Kerr and Doug Keenan have expanded on Cadman and Dunn's work, claiming that these pulses of water could have reached the ascending passage and forced the granite blocks to slide up and down like pistons. If hydrogen gas were produced in the Queen's Chamber, as Dunn believed, it would be forced up through the gallery and into the King's Chamber by the action of these pistons. These gases could have also been ignited to create a pulse jet, which would have left the kinds of burn marks found on the ceiling of the gallery and the King's Chamber. The pulse jet and the water hammer would cause the granite stones to vibrate, and the sound would be converted into electricity through the piezoelectric characteristics of the quartz inside. Others have suggested that the pyramid may have served some spiritual function, acting as an aid for meditation or astral travel. One of the more orthodox theories is that the shafts in the King's Chamber were used to transport the pharaoh's ka, or vital essence, to its place in the stars. But the pyramid has other strange effects as well. An article in the Journal of Applied Physics demonstrated that it concentrates electromagnetic energy in the chambers and under the base. Visitors regularly report strange feelings in the chambers, especially when lying in the granite box. In 1996, sound engineer Tom Danley studied the pyramid's interior and determined that the entire structure seemed designed to enhance internal vibrations. Most rooms, and the King's Chamber in particular, are extremely resonant and reflective. He discovered that the subterranean chamber enhanced low-end vibrations at 30 and 90 Hz, and found that wind across the upper shafts created an audible resonance at 16 Hz. Together, these resonances formed an F-sharp chord, which the ancient Egyptians believed was the resonant harmonic center of the Earth. Acoustics are an integral part of achieving altered states of consciousness, and many ancient cultures entered trance states with the help of sound vibrations and reflective spaces. Perhaps the pyramid was designed to facilitate mind-altering experiences for religious or spiritual purposes, as Schock has speculated. Though the majority of Egyptologists insist that the Great Pyramid was a tomb for Khufu, no mummy has been found inside, and its interior spaces look nothing like the grand galleries of other tombs. Many of its most perplexing features suggest that there was some other purpose to the structure. One can derive a variety of Earth measurements, stellar alignments, and advanced mathematical concepts from its design, and it has too many peculiar acoustic and electromagnetic properties to assume that they weren't intended. We may never know whether the Great Pyramid of Gize was meant to watch the stars, generate power, or facilitate the voyage of the human soul, but it was almost certainly something more than just a tomb. Visit our website at thinkanomalous.com, where we have text versions of every video and original articles on anomalous phenomena, and consider supporting us on Patreon.